I thought I was driving my husband to the airport for a business trip. I had no idea I was actually driving him to the first move in a scheme he and his mother had been planning for over a year. A scheme that turned my house into a prison and my marriage into a financial extraction operation. What made it so calculated, so perfectly laid, was this. He kissed me at the departures terminal, told me he loved me, and left me standing on the curb with his parents' suitcases already parked in our hallway. 6 credit cards, 6, all in my name, all linked to my income, all given to him as a convenience. I stood on that curb, watching his silhouette disappear through the sliding glass doors, and I was already reaching for my phone. He had no idea what I was about to do. Neither did his parents, standing back at the house, probably already rearranging my kitchen cabinets. That was the last time any of them underestimated me. Our house, and I use the word our loosely because my name was the only one on the deed, was a 4-bedroom colonial on Millbrook Lane, in the kind of suburb where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings and wave at each other across driveways. I had bought it 3 years before I married Nathan, using money I'd saved over 6 years of working as a project engineer at a mid-sized infrastructure consultancy. It was not a glamorous career, not the kind of thing that made people's eyes light up at dinner parties, but it was mine, built from a series of early mornings, late bids, and slow, unglamorous competence. The house was what I'd always wanted: a covered porch, a yard deep enough for a garden, a kitchen with actual counter space. I used to sit on that porch with a mug of coffee on Sunday mornings and feel, very quietly, like I had made something real. Nathan came into my life 2 years after I bought it. We met at a work function. He was a financial analyst at a firm that occasionally collaborated with mine, and the attraction was immediate and comfortable in a way that I mistook for certainty. He was charming without being aggressive, attentive without being overwhelming, and he had a warm laugh that filled rooms. When he asked if he could come see the house 6 months into dating, I said yes without hesitation. He stood in the kitchen doorway that evening, looked around at the rooms I had built for myself, and said, "You made all of this." It sounded like admiration. I know now it was appraisal. We got married 18 months later in a small ceremony at an orchard outside the city. His mother, Eleanor, wore a cream dress that was just slightly too close to white and spent the reception correcting the catering staff. I noticed both of these things and filed them away as personality quirks, that particular category of cognitive filing system we use when we love someone and do not yet want to examine what we're excusing. His father, Gerald, was quieter, a retired contractor with a hearing aid and an opinion about every home improvement project that had ever been undertaken anywhere, but manageable. They lived 40 minutes away in a house they rented, and for the first 2 years of our marriage, the distance was enough. The arrangement of our life was not complicated. Nathan worked, I worked. We split groceries, shared the mortgage payments, though his contribution was more a gesture than a necessity, and ate dinner together most nights at the kitchen table I had picked out myself at an estate sale and stripped and refinished over 3 weekends. I liked those evenings. I liked the smell of whatever was on the stove, the particular amber light the kitchen made at 7 o'clock in October, the way Nathan would sit across from me with his sleeves rolled up and ask what I'd dealt with that day. I had built a good, ordinary life. And in retrospect, I think that is exactly what made me so easy to deceive. I had too much to lose, and too much faith that the person sitting across from me understood that. The first sign came 8 months before the airport, though I didn't recognize it as a sign at the time. I recognized it as a conversation I didn't like, which is not the same thing. Nathan came home on a Thursday evening. I remember it was Thursday because I had leftover soup from the weekend on the stove and was heating it while I answered emails on my laptop. And he sat down at the table with an expression I had never quite seen on him before. Not distressed exactly, more like a man holding something he is trying to decide how to put down. "My parents are having a hard time," he said. I stirred the soup and waited. The rent went up again, 3rd time in 2 years. Dad's not working anymore, and Mom's, you know how she is. She's not great at managing. He paused. I've been helping them out a little, financially. I should have told you. I turned the burner down and sat across from him. How much and for how long? About $300 a month, since March. It was November. That was 8 months of $300 that had quietly left our joint account without my knowing. I felt a small, clean spike of anger that I pressed down without ceremony. "Okay," I said, "but you should have told me. We made an agreement about the joint account." "I know. I'm sorry." He did look sorry. He looked tired and a little ashamed, and I believed both, which was my first significant error. I just didn't want to make it a whole thing. They're my parents. "I know they're your parents," I said, "but I'm your wife. The account is both of ours. You tell me things." He nodded. He apologized again. We ate the soup. The conversation ended in the way that many such conversations ended in our marriage, with the issue acknowledged, but not fully examined, with the discomfort smoothed over just enough to become bearable. I told myself it was $300 a month, and he had come clean about it. I told myself the important thing was that he'd told me now. I told myself a great many things over soup that I would later understand were not conclusions, but postponements. The second sign came 4 months later, in March, when Eleanor called me on a Wednesday morning while I was at my desk reviewing bid documents. I answered because I always answered. That was another error. "Clara," she said. She always said my name like she was setting it on a table and stepping back from it. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something. As family." The phrase "as family" was one of Eleanor's favorite tools. It meant, what I am about to say should not be examined too closely. Gerald and I have been thinking about our situation, the practical side of things. "Okay," I said, and moved my coffee cup further from the keyboard. "It might make sense," she said, in the careful tone of someone reading from a script they've practiced, "for us to consolidate. As a family. There's so much space at the house." I said nothing for 3 seconds. Then I said, "You're talking about moving in." "Temporarily," she said, "while things settle. Just until Gerald is back on his feet. We would be very respectful of the space." I told her I appreciated her bringing it to me directly and that I would talk to Nathan about it. I hung up and sat for a long moment looking at the bid documents on my screen without reading them. Then I opened a new message to Nathan and typed, "Your mother just called me about moving in. Did you know about this?" He replied 11 minutes later, "She mentioned it. I didn't want to bring it up until I'd thought it through. Can we talk tonight?" We talked tonight. He was, as I would learn was a pattern, already past the point of thinking it through by the time we sat down. He had reached his conclusion, which was that his parents should move in, temporarily, in the downstairs guest room in the office, and the conversation was less a discussion than a managed announcement. He used words like practical and family obligation and just for a few months. He did not ask me what I thought about living in my own house with his parents. He told me what he had decided and then looked at me with an expression of patient expectation, the way someone holds open a door. I said I needed time to think. He said he'd already told them there was room. The silence that followed that sentence was the loudest thing I had heard in our marriage. I looked at him across the table, this man I had loved, this man whose name I had taken, this man who was sitting in the kitchen I had built, and I felt something shift in the architecture of what I thought I understood about us. It was small, it was quiet, it was the first stone. "You told them before asking me," I said. "I didn't want to get your hopes up if it wasn't going to work," he said. I heard this sentence. I heard every word of it. I let it sit in the room between us, and I thought about what it meant, that my hopes in this scenario were an obstacle to be managed, that I was a variable in a plan he and his mother had already run the numbers on. I thought about the $300 a month. I thought about the phone call from Eleanor, practiced and smooth and perfectly timed. "Fine," I said, "but we set clear boundaries. Your parents are guests in this house, my house. That doesn't change." Nathan nodded. He looked relieved. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and I let him, because I did not yet have the full picture. I had the corner pieces. I had the edge. The middle was still coming. Gerald and Eleanor arrived on a Saturday with 3 carloads of furniture, 2 boxes of framed photographs, and Eleanor's collection of decorative ceramic owls, which she placed on the mantelpiece in the living room before I had even finished clearing space in the guest room. I watched her arrange them, 13 ceramic owls in a row on the mantelpiece of the house I had bought, in the living room where I had hosted my own friends for 7 years. And I breathed through my nose and said nothing. The owls watched me with their flat, painted eyes. I decided they were temporary. They were not temporary. The first month was uncomfortable in the way of an ill-fitting shoe. Not actively painful, but wrong. Eleanor reorganized the kitchen twice, with apologies that were technically apologies, but functionally announcements. Gerald watched television at a volume calibrated for a man who didn't know he had hearing loss, which meant I fell asleep to the murmur of cable news through 2 closed doors. Meals became complicated. Eleanor cooked without asking, and then looked at me with an expression of maternal patience when I suggested I would prefer to cook my own dinner. "I just want to help," she said, in the tone she always used for sentences that were not about help. The second month, Nathan started working late. Not every night, every other night, with a consistency that seemed almost scheduled. He would text at 5:30, late meeting, probably 8:30. He would come home, kiss me in the hallway, exchange a few sentences, and retire to his phone. I started noticing that his phone was always face down on the kitchen table. I noticed this the way you notice a draft from a window you haven't opened. Not with alarm exactly, but with the particular awareness of something that should not be there. I mentioned it once, lightly. He said he was just trying to be present at dinner, and wasn't that what I'd said I wanted? It was, technically, a reasonable answer. I accepted it and did not mention it again. But I watched. I had become someone who watched. The third month, Eleanor asked me about the deed. We were in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. Nathan was at the grocery store, a task Eleanor had helpfully offered to manage for the household, but which Nathan had preempted, possibly because he sensed I needed a morning without her. And Gerald was asleep in the guest room. Eleanor was making tea and I was reading at the kitchen table, and the light was the gray-white of an early winter morning, and everything looked almost domestic and almost peaceful. "I've been curious," Eleanor said, carrying her tea to the table and sitting down across from me without being invited, "about the house, practically speaking. Is it in both your names, you and Nathan?" I looked up from my book. "Just curious," she said and smiled, "for family planning purposes, in case something happened to one of you. These things matter." "It's in my name," I said. Her expression did not change, not a flicker. That was the thing about Eleanor. She had the face of a woman who had long ago mastered the art of not reacting to information she had already expected. "Just yours?" she said. "Just mine," I said. "I bought it before we were married." "Ah," she said. She lifted her tea. "And Nathan's name was never added?" "No." She nodded slowly, as if she were turning over something reasonable and administrative in her mind. "That seems like something you might want to address, legally, for both your sakes." I put my book face down on the table. "Why would I want to address it?" She gave me the smile she used when she wanted to indicate that I was being emotional. "Because it's a marriage, Clara, not a rental agreement. If something happened to you, Nathan would have no legal—" "Eleanor," I said her name carefully, the way you set something fragile down. "Thank you for the concern. It's handled." She nodded again, more slowly, and returned to her tea. The owls watched us from the mantelpiece. Gerald snored faintly down the hall. I looked at my book without reading a word of it and felt, with absolute clarity, that we had just played the opening move of something neither of us was going to name for a long time yet. 4 weeks after the kitchen conversation about the deed, I found the folder. It wasn't dramatic in the way that discoveries are supposed to be. There was no thunderclap, no sudden burst of dramatic music from the universe to signal that I was standing at the edge of something that would rearrange everything. I was simply looking for a phone charger. Nathan had taken mine by accident, at least I assumed by accident, and I remembered seeing a spare in the top drawer of the desk in the home office, the room we had converted from its original use as a study into something halfway between a workspace and Gerald's hobby room, since Gerald had apparently decided that retirement meant building model trains and storing the components on surfaces that had previously belonged to me. It was a Tuesday evening, close to 9. Nathan was still at work, or said he was, and Eleanor was watching television in the living room, and Gerald was doing whatever Gerald did, and the house was running its nighttime sounds. The tick of the furnace, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant cable news murmur through the wall. I walked into the office, moved a half-assembled locomotive off the desk with the very particular patience I had developed over the past 3 months, and opened the top drawer. The charger was there. So was a manila folder, tucked behind a container of paper clips and a stapler that had no label on it but was slightly thicker than a folder that contained nothing important. I took it out. I told myself, later, that I should have closed it and put it back. I told myself that a person who trusted her husband and valued her marriage would have closed the folder and walked out of the office with the charger and gone to bed. But I had been watching things for months. I had been cataloging the face-down phone, the late evenings, the careful conversations about deeds and inheritance and family planning. I had been storing information in a part of myself that I didn't fully acknowledge in daylight, and that part of myself knew, before I opened the cover, that the folder was not about model trains. Inside there were 6 pages. The first was a printout of what appeared to be a preliminary legal consultation summary, not from our family attorney, whose letterhead I knew, but from a firm called Whitmore and Associates that I had never heard of. At the top, in a format that was clearly a consultation summary rather than a final document, the matter was described as Transfer of Residential Property/Spousal Quitclaim, Preliminary Assessment. My hands went cold. Not shaking, that came later. Cold first, the way flesh goes cold when blood retreats from the extremities to protect the organs. I read the first paragraph. Then I read it again. The summary outlined a scenario in which a spouse could be persuaded, or, in a series of increasingly specific bullet points, could be legally compelled under certain marital property frameworks to execute a quitclaim deed transferring their sole ownership property to joint marital ownership, at which point additional legal mechanisms could be deployed to protect the interests of, and here the language became slightly opaque, as legal language does when it is trying not to say something directly, other family members with an established residential interest in the property. I understood what I was reading. It had taken me until the 3rd paragraph, but I understood it fully by the time I reached the bottom of the page. Eleanor wanted the house. Not a room in it, not a temporary arrangement while Gerald got back on his feet. The house. And someone who had access to manila folders in my home office, someone who worked in finance and would know exactly how to research a quitclaim process, someone whose name was on our joint bank account, had been consulting a law firm about how to get it. The 2nd page was worse. It was a printed email thread, and the sender on the most recent email, sent 6 weeks ago from Nathan's personal Gmail address to Eleanor's AOL account, which I had always found slightly absurd and now found terrifying, read in part, Mom, attached is the summary from the consultation. The key issue is timing. It has to happen before I leave, or it becomes more complicated from overseas. The attorney says the cleanest approach is if she signs voluntarily during a period of goodwill. I can work on that. If not, there are other options, but we should try the clean route first. Don't say anything to her yet. I put the paper down on the desk. I stood there in the office with the model trains and the manila folder and the sound of the cable news through the wall, and I did not move for what felt like a very long time. The sentence ran through my mind with the repetitive precision of a machine. Before I leave. Before he left. He was planning to leave. And there it was, the piece I had been missing, the central architecture of the thing, the element that made everything else click into terrible place. Nathan was not simply helping his parents find accommodation. Nathan was engineering a situation in which his parents would be installed in my house, his name would be on the deed, and then he would be gone, overseas, out of jurisdiction, unreachable, while Eleanor managed the property she had effectively inherited through me. I can work on that. He had been working on it. The late evenings, the phone face down on the table. The careful, patient conversations about family and practicality and what's best for everyone. He had been working on it the entire time. And I had been living in the house I paid for, sitting across from the man I married, eating dinners he'd described as present, and none of it, not 1 second of it, had been what I thought it was. I leafed through the remaining 4 pages. There was a financial projection, handwritten in Nathan's compact, careful script, outlining what appeared to be a rental income estimate for the property if 2 of the 4 bedrooms were let out, with a notation that read, "Parents take master, rent 2 others, net income approximately $2,100 per month." There was a copied page from a foreign employment contract, the kind of contract that comes from a relocation package, dated 3 months earlier, which meant Nathan had been in negotiations for an overseas position for 3 months while telling me nothing about it. There was a note, also handwritten, that listed 6 credit card numbers and the phrase, "Clara's liability, not mine, under international jurisdiction." And there was a sticky note on the last page that said, in Eleanor's tight schoolteacher's handwriting, "We only get 1 chance at this. Make it clean." I closed the folder. I put it back exactly where I had found it, behind the paper clips and the stapler. I picked up the charger. I turned off the office light. I walked down the hallway to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, drank half of it standing at the counter, and listened to the house. Eleanor's television, Gerald's occasional cough down the hall, the furnace, the refrigerator, the particular silence of my own home, which was no longer mine in the way I had believed it was mine 2 hours ago, which had been a stage set for a performance I had not auditioned for, in which I was cast as the mark. I put the glass down. I went upstairs. I lay in bed next to my husband's empty side of the mattress. He was still at work, and I looked at the ceiling and I thought, with a clarity that felt almost clinical, about what I was going to do. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. There was a moment, somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd page of the folder, where something hot and sharp pressed against the backs of my eyes, and I held myself very still until it passed. I did not cry because crying was a release, and I did not want release. I wanted information. I wanted time. I wanted to understand the full geometry of what had been built around me before I dismantled a single piece of it. Nathan came home at 11:15. I heard his key in the lock, his footsteps on the stairs, the bathroom door, the quiet. He slid into bed carefully, trying not to wake me, and I lay perfectly still with my eyes closed and my breathing even, and let him believe I was asleep. He was still for 3 minutes. Then I heard his breathing slow and lengthen into sleep, and I lay there in the dark next to the man who had written, "I can work on that," in an email to his mother about my house and my compliance, and I stared at the ceiling and made a list in my head. The list had 5 items on it. Number 1, photographs of every page of that folder. Number 2, a call to my attorney, David Park, first thing in the morning. Number 3, a quiet conversation with my bank. Number 4, a separate conversation with the credit card company. Number 5, nothing. No confrontation, no scene, no indication that anything had changed. Not yet. He had a plan. It was detailed and patient, and it had been in progress for months. Mine had been running for approximately 3 hours, and it was simpler and more complete because I had one advantage Nathan had apparently not fully accounted for. I had been paying attention. I had been building something in the back of my mind for weeks without fully naming it, and now I knew what it was. It was not a plan of revenge. It was something more practical and more permanent than that. I was going to let him go. I was going to drive him to the airport. I was going to kiss him goodbye. I was going to stand on the curb and watch his silhouette disappear through the sliding glass doors. And then I was going to take out my phone with both hands, completely steady, and do what needed to be done. But first, I had to photograph the folder, and I had to do it before he woke up. I waited 40 minutes, listening to the particular rhythm of Nathan's deep sleep. Then I slid out of bed, moved through the dark hallway without turning on a light. I knew every creak in the floorboards the way you know the house you have lived in for 7 years, and went back to the office. I photographed all 6 pages. I sent them to my personal email account and to a cloud storage folder I had created for this purpose approximately 40 minutes earlier, when I had been lying in bed making my list. I was methodical about it. I checked each image for legibility. I confirmed the sends. I returned the folder to its exact position behind the paper clips and the stapler. I turned off the office light. I went back to bed. I lay there for another 2 hours before I slept. In the morning, Nathan came downstairs at 7 and made coffee the way he always did, filling the house with a smell that had meant safety to me for 3 years. He kissed me on the temple, asked if I'd slept well, and told me he had something he wanted to talk about over the weekend. He said it with the careful ease of a man who has rehearsed the opening of a conversation, and I looked at him over my coffee mug. This man I had loved. This man who had written, "Make it clean." And I said, "Of course, this weekend sounds good." He smiled. He was relieved. He had no idea why. I called David Park at 8:45 from my car in the parking structure at work. David had been my attorney for 4 years. He'd handled the house purchase. He'd reviewed the prenuptial agreement that Nathan had dismissed as unnecessary, and I had insisted on. He was thorough and unhurried, and exactly the kind of person you wanted in your corner when someone had written a 6-page extraction plan about your property. I told him I needed an urgent appointment, and I had documents to share. He had a cancellation that afternoon at 4. I went. I showed him the photographs. I watched his face move through the expressions that legal professionals make when they are reading something that is both professionally interesting and humanly appalling. A kind of careful, narrowing attention that didn't fully flatten until he put the last photograph down and looked at me. "How long have they been in the house?" he asked. 3 months. "And when is he leaving?" "I don't know exactly. Soon." I thought about the employment contract. The contract was dated 3 months ago. He hasn't told me about it. My guess is the timeline is short. David nodded. He spent 2 minutes writing on a yellow legal pad. Then he looked up. "The prenuptial agreement you have clearly establishes the house as your separate property," he said. "The quitclaim consultation they did, it's exploratory, not binding. Nothing has been signed. They haven't actually done anything yet." "Yet," I said. "Yet," he agreed, "which means we move first." He turned the legal pad toward me. The first item he had written was, "Certified copy, deed plus prenup, county recorder." The second was, "Cease and desist, Whitmore and Associates." The third was, "Credit account review, separate immediately." The fourth was, "Formal notice to additional occupants, guest status versus tenancy." I looked at the list. "I don't want to move on the house yet," I said. "I want to wait until he's gone." David studied me for a moment. "Why?" "Because once he's gone, his leverage is gone," I said. "He's built this plan around being present for the signing. He said so in the email. If I move before he leaves, he'll either cancel his trip or he'll escalate, and I'd rather have the escalation happen when he's 8 time zones away." David considered this. "That's not the conservative approach." "I'm not interested in conservative," I said. "I'm interested in effective." He nodded slowly, and I thought I saw something in his expression that might have been respect. "All right," he said. "Then here's what we do in the meantime." We mapped it out in 40 minutes. It was precise and it was calibrated, and it accounted for every variable I could anticipate. I drove home with the yellow legal pad in my bag and a plan that had, in 24 hours, grown from 5 items to 12, and I walked back into my house and ate dinner at my kitchen table with my husband and his parents, and I listened to Eleanor talk about a home renovation program she'd watched that afternoon, and I asked Gerald about his trains, and I passed the bread without being asked, and I was the picture of a woman who had nothing particular on her mind. I was the most frightening I had ever been in my life. I just hadn't shown it to anyone yet. The week before the airport was the week Nathan finally told me. He chose a Sunday morning for it, our morning, historically, the one I'd protected most carefully, the coffee on the porch ritual I had built into the architecture of my week. He came out with his own mug, sat across from me in the second porch chair, and said, with the expression of a man delivering something he had worked out how to say for a very long time, "I've been offered a position overseas. It's a significant opportunity. It's 4 years." I looked at him. 4 years. "It's Singapore," he said. "The firm has been building out an Asia-Pacific division. It's a senior role. It's what I've been working toward." The morning was cool and still, the kind of March morning that hasn't decided yet whether it's winter or spring. I could smell the coffee and the damp grass and the very faint ghost of whatever Eleanor had cooked for breakfast. A cardinal landed on the porch railing, decided against staying, and left. "When did they offer this to you?" I said. He paused. "A few months ago. I wanted to be sure before I brought it to you." "A few months ago," I said. "I know the timing is complicated, with my parents here, but they could manage the house while I'm away. It would make the most sense for them to stay on, rather than find somewhere else, and I would do what?" I asked. He looked at me with an expression I now read as the look of a man who has prepared for many responses and is not certain which one I'm about to give. "You'd still be here," he said. "You'd still have your work, your life here. We'd visit. 4 years goes fast." I looked at him. I thought about the manila folder. I thought about, I can work on that. I thought about the sticky note in Eleanor's handwriting. We only get one chance at this. I thought about 6 credit cards in my name. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "Okay?" "Okay," I said. "Tell me the details." He told me the details. I listened. I asked questions about the timeline and the compensation and the firm's relocation package, and I listened to his answers with the focused attention of a woman gathering information, and he talked with the growing ease of a man who believes he has gotten away with something. By the end of the conversation, he was almost ebullient, lighter than he'd been in weeks, the relief of the unsaid thing finally said, washing through him in a way that I imagine felt like resolution, like forward motion, like clean. He had no idea that what he had just done was hand me the final piece of the timeline. I said I needed a few days to process. He said, "Of course, absolutely. Take all the time you need," and went back inside, and I sat on the porch with my coffee going cold and did the math in my head one more time. 6 days until the departure date he had mentioned, 6 days to finalize what David and I had outlined, 6 days to make sure everything was in order before I stood on that curb and became, for the last time, a woman whose husband did not understand what she was capable of. I drove Nathan to the airport on a Thursday morning in mid-March. He had packed 3 suitcases and a carry-on. Eleanor helped him the night before, folding his shirts with the careful, proprietary attention of a woman reclaiming something she'd always considered hers. And Gerald shook his hand at the front door in the particular way of men who aren't good at goodbyes, grip hard and brief, look at the middle distance. I carried one of the suitcases to the car. I wore the gray wool coat Nathan had given me for Christmas 2 years ago because it was cold and because wearing it felt, in a way I couldn't entirely articulate, like the appropriate costume for what I was about to do. We drove mostly in silence. Nathan talked about the logistics, the apartment the firm had arranged in Singapore, the transition period, the things he needed me to manage on the home front while he was gone. He said home front in the tone of someone who had rehearsed the phrase and believed it was reassuring. He told me not to worry about his parents, that they would handle themselves. He said he would transfer money for household expenses every month, using which account, I noticed, he did not specify. "The credit cards," I said, when we were 20 minutes from the airport. "The 6 I'm the primary on, those are still active." "Yeah, I have them all," he said. "I'll use them for setup costs in the first few weeks. The firm reimburses. It's just easier to put it on the card and claim it back." "You don't need to do anything with those." "Got it," I said. He reached over and put his hand on mine on the gear shift. It was warm. It was the hand of a man I had loved for 4 years, the hand I had held at the altar, the hand that had written emails about my house behind my back. I let him hold it. I kept my eyes on the road. The departures terminal at Logan is a managed kind of chaos. Taxis and ride shares and families with too much luggage, and the particular compressed emotion of people who are about to be separated from each other by distance and time. We pulled up to the curb. I helped him get the suitcases out. He tipped the sky cap and turned to me and took my face in both his hands. "I love you," he said. "This is going to be good for us. I really believe that." I looked at him. His face was open, earnest, entirely convinced. The face of a man who had convinced himself that what he had done and was doing was somehow, in some interior accounting, acceptable. People are remarkable in their capacity for that kind of self-convincing. I had spent 3 years watching him love me genuinely and deceive me deliberately, and I think he experienced no contradiction between the two, which is possibly the most frightening thing about all of it. "Safe flight," I said. I kissed him. I held his gaze for 1 second after the kiss. Then I stepped back. He smiled. He picked up his carry-on. He turned and walked through the sliding glass doors of the departures terminal, and I watched his silhouette pass through the automated doors, and then he was through the security line entrance and out of sight. I stood on the curb. The March wind cut across the exposed concrete of the terminal approach, carrying the diesel smell of idling vehicles and the sharp cold of a New England morning that had not yet decided to be spring. A family with 3 children streamed past me. A cab honked twice. The sliding doors opened and closed on the rhythm of other people's departures. I took out my phone. My hands were completely steady. I opened the banking app first. The joint account, from which I had, over the preceding 6 days, quietly transferred all but the required minimum balance into my individual account, showed a balance of $213. I had done this in 3 separate transactions spread over 4 days, each one unremarkable on its own. David had told me to document each transfer with a contemporaneous note. I had. Every cent was accounted for. Then I opened the credit card management app. 6 cards, 6 accounts, all under my name as primary cardholder, Nathan listed as an authorized user on each. I had, as of yesterday afternoon, already contacted the issuer and removed Nathan as an authorized user on 5 of the 6. The 6th I left open until this moment because I wanted to do it here, standing on this curb with the airport at my back. I tapped the account. I tapped Manage Authorized Users. I tapped Nathan's name. I tapped Remove. The app asked me to confirm. I confirmed. 6 cards, frozen, effective immediately. He would find out when he tried to pay for something in Singapore, an airport meal, a cab to the apartment the firm had arranged, a coffee, something small and ordinary that would suddenly simply not work. The card would decline. He would try another. It would decline. He would try a third. And then the particular cold understanding would arrive that all 6 had declined, and that would be the moment he understood that something had gone wrong with his plan, though at that point he wouldn't yet know how wrong, or how thoroughly, or how long I had been watching. I put my phone in my coat pocket. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment with both hands on the wheel, looking at the concrete pillar in front of me, and I thought, it's done. The first part. The rest would take longer. I drove home. Eleanor was in the kitchen when I got back. She was standing at the counter making tea with the ease of someone who has fully inhabited a space. Drawers opened without hesitation, cabinets accessed from memory, the kettle already filled and on. She looked up when I came in, and her expression was the particular expression of a woman who was trying to look neutral and wasn't quite managing it. There was something underneath it, a small, precise calculation. She was waiting to see what version of me walked through the door. "How was the drive?" she said. "Fine," I said. I took off the gray coat and hung it on the hook by the door. "He got off all right?" "He got off all right." I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the counter and looked at her, and the morning light came through the window at the angle it always came through at 9:15, and the ceramic owls on the mantelpiece watched us both with their flat, painted eyes, and Eleanor held her tea and waited. "Eleanor," I said, "I want to talk to you about something." She turned toward me with an expression of practiced openness. "Of course," she said. "What is it?" "I know about the folder," I said. The kitchen was very quiet for 3 seconds. The furnace ticked, the refrigerator hummed. Eleanor's expression did not collapse, she was too controlled for that, but it changed in a way that was visible to anyone who was paying attention, which I was. The openness thinned. Behind it was something older and harder and not particularly surprised. "I don't know what folder you mean," she said. "The one in the desk in the office," I said. "The legal consultation summary from Whitmore and Associates. The email thread from Nathan. The financial projection. The employment contract he didn't tell me about." I paused. "The note in your handwriting?" She set her tea down. "I think you may be misinterpreting." "I'm not misinterpreting," I said. "I've photographed everything. I've shared it with my attorney. I've already made the relevant calls to the bank and the credit card company. Nathan's authorized user status on all 6 cards was removed this morning before I drove him to the airport." I looked at her steadily. "I want you to understand that clearly. Whatever you were planning, it has already been addressed." The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Gerald appeared in the kitchen doorway in his bathrobe, drawn by the quality of the quiet, the particular silence that occurs when something structural has cracked, and everyone in the room knows it. He looked from Eleanor to me. He said, "What's going on?" Neither of us answered him immediately. Eleanor's composure, which was considerable, I will give her that, it was genuinely formidable, held for another few seconds. Then she sat down at the kitchen table. Not dramatically, not in collapse. She sat down carefully, the way you sit when your legs have decided they're done, regardless of what your face is doing. "You were never going to sign willingly," she said. It wasn't a question. She said it in the tone of someone arriving at a diagnosis they had suspected. "No," I said. "The house is mine," I said. "It was mine before I married your son. The prenuptial agreement establishes that without ambiguity. Whitmore and Associates, if you go back and consult with them, will confirm that the quit-claim approach they outlined has zero viability given the prenup." I paused. "They should have told you that at the consultation." Eleanor was quiet. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. I kept my voice at the same register, not cold, not hot, just factual, the voice of a project engineer explaining the constraints of a site to a contractor who has proposed something structurally unsound. "I have drafted a formal notice establishing the terms of your residency in this house. You are guests. The notice clarifies that your presence is not a tenancy and does not constitute any legal claim on the property. My attorney delivered a cease and desist to Whitmore and Associates yesterday." Gerald made a sound. Eleanor didn't look at him. "And," I said, "I have filed for divorce." The kitchen was absolutely still. Gerald took a step backward. His hand found the door frame. Eleanor's face went through something. Not quite shock, because I didn't think she was entirely incapable of anticipating this, but something more complicated than she'd expected. Something that had the quality of a plan arriving at a conclusion it had not modeled. "You filed?" she said. It came out slightly flat, slightly dry, like a sentence that had lost its intended register somewhere between thought and speech. "Yesterday afternoon," I said. "Nathan was served this morning. The papers were delivered to the airport approximately 20 minutes before his flight boarded." I lifted my glass of water and drank the rest of it. He should be discovering that around now, actually, if he took the time to read them. Eleanor looked at me. She was, for the first time since I had known her, not performing anything. The faux maternal warmth, the concerned family member register, the smoothly deployed expressions of patient reasonableness, all of it was gone. What was underneath was a woman who was intelligent and strategic, and who had, for the first time in this particular engagement, encountered a variable she had not factored in. "We have nowhere to go," she said. It was not a plea exactly. It had too much spine for a plea, but it was honest in a way she had not been with me before. I recognized, underneath the calculation, something real. Two elderly people who had built a plan around a son who was now 35,000 feet over the Pacific, and a house that was not theirs, and a woman who had gotten there first. "You have 60 days," I said. "The formal notice outlines the timeline. 60 days from today. I will not pursue any legal action during that period, provided you respect the terms of the notice and make no further attempts to contact my attorney or initiate any property-related proceedings." I put the glass in the sink. "I'm going to go to work now. Gerald, there's coffee in the pot if you want it." I picked up my bag. I walked past them both, through the kitchen and into the hallway, and I took my keys from the hook by the door. The hook I had installed myself on a Saturday afternoon 3 years before Nathan came to look at the house I had built, and I went to work. I sat in my car in the driveway for approximately 45 seconds first, not out of hesitation, out of something else, the particular, strange, airless feeling of a moment you have been building toward for months, arriving. My heart was beating very fast. My hands were not shaking. Outside, the March morning continued its business. A dog walker on the sidewalk, a neighbor's recycling bin blown into the street by the wind, a crow on the telephone wire studying the scene with professional dispassion. I backed out of the driveway and drove to work. I got a call from Nathan at 11:47 a.m. I was in a meeting and let it go to voicemail. I got another call at 12:03, another at 12:31. At 12:45, I got a text message that read, "Clara, what the hell is going on? Call me now." At 1:15, another text. "The divorce papers. Are you serious? Call me." At 2:04, "Clara, I know you're angry. Please pick up. We can fix this. My parents are there. Please don't do this to them. They have nowhere." I read the messages at lunch, sitting at my desk with a sandwich I wasn't particularly hungry for, and I noticed the way the framing shifted across the texts, from "call me" to "are you serious" to "my parents are there." By the third text, his concern had migrated from the marriage to the logistics, which told me a great deal about how he'd been thinking about this all along. I did not call back. I texted my attorney. "He's calling." "I won't respond. Is that right?" David texted back, "Correct. All communication goes through me from here." I put my phone in my desk drawer and went back to the bid documents. The 60 days were not quiet, but they were manageable because I had already done the most important work before Nathan's flight left the tarmac. Eleanor tried first. Sunday evening, bedroom door, manufactured softness. Nathan called. He's devastated. I told her all communication went through my attorney and closed the door. She tried twice more that week. David sent a letter. It stopped. Nathan's Singapore attorney argued equitable interest, that his household contributions gave him a stake in my house. David answered with a line-item accounting of every dollar I had put into the property, cross-referenced against the prenup, with photographs of the folder attached. The equitable interest argument disappeared within 11 days. Gerald surprised me. I found him early one morning with photographs of the foundation, a crack on the east wall, a permitting issue on the rear addition. "This is not a threat," he said, in a voice I hadn't heard from him before. "What my son did was wrong. What Eleanor planned was wrong. I didn't stop it when I should have." He gave me the name of a structural engineer. I thanked him. That was the most honest conversation I had in that house during those 2 months. Nathan and I spoke once by video call. White borrowed walls behind him, the gray shirt I had bought him for his birthday. "I told myself it was practical," he started. I stopped him. I didn't need the reasoning. I understood it completely. He had needed money, his parents had needed housing, and I had been the convenient solution. The part he got wrong was assuming I wouldn't notice, or that if I noticed, I'd be too afraid of conflict to act. He said he was sorry. It sounded small. "I hope Singapore is good," I said, and meant it. I ended the call and signed the settlement that week. Eleanor and Gerald moved out on a Wednesday in May. When the last box was loaded, Eleanor found me in the kitchen and stood in the doorway. "You're smarter than I thought you were." Not an apology, the closest she could get to one. "I know," I said. The door closed, the truck pulled away. I took all 13 ceramic owls off the mantelpiece, boxed them, and left them by the door. They weren't bad objects. They had just been in the wrong house. 6 months later, I sat on the porch on a November morning with coffee and a high, cold New England sky. Foundation repaired, divorce final. Nathan had his accounts in his storage unit. I had the house, by deed, by history, by the specific knowledge that comes only from fighting for something you built yourself. I had lost a marriage. I had lost the version of me that kept peace at the cost of clarity. But I had done what needed doing without a scene, without shouting, without losing composure in front of people who were counting on me to lose it. A folder of photographs, a prenuptial agreement, a good attorney, 6 credit cards frozen on a curb with steady hands. The Cardinal landed on the railing, considered its options, and stayed.